Admiral Park Hyun pressed his palm against the cold metal wall of New Geneva Station's observation deck. Through the massive viewing window, the dying red star painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. The ancient sun had been burning for billions of years, and now it was slowly consuming itself, just like humanity seemed to be doing. 50,000 people. That was all that remained of the human race among the stars. 50,000 souls crammed into a space station that was built to hold 20,000 comfortably. The air recyclers worked overtime, making strange clicking sounds that nobody talked about but everyone heard. The food synthesizers produced meals that tasted like cardboard mixed with metal shavings. Children cried in the night, and their parents had no answers to give them. Hyun watched a small transport shuttle dock at the lower bay. More refugees, probably from the mining colony on Kepler 442. He had stopped asking how many survivors each rescue ship brought back. The numbers were always too small, and they were running out of places to put people. The communication panel buzzed with an incoming message. Captain Lee Miho's tired voice filled the observation deck. Admiral, the Velthari fleet has moved to final positions around our system. They've got us completely surrounded now. No way in, no way out. Hyun nodded to himself. He had been expecting this moment for weeks. The Velthari were nothing if not thorough. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them completely. Every human colony, every outpost, every mining station had been systematically destroyed over the past 3 years. The reptilian aliens viewed humans as some kind of disease that needed to be cleaned from the galaxy. What's our defensive status? Hyun asked, though he already knew the answer would be grim. 7 cruisers, sir. The Busan is still missing its main engine. The Seoul has no shields. The others are running on backup power. We've got maybe 30 fighter craft that are actually flight ready. Miho paused. Sir, they have over 200 ships out there. Battleships, destroyers, carrier vessels. We're looking at impossible odds. The comm system crackled again, but this time it wasn't Miho's voice. A harsh, cold sound filled the air like grinding metal. War Commander Thekval was broadcasting on all frequencies again. Weak mammals of the dying star system, the alien voice said in perfect, emotionless English. You have wasted enough of our valuable time with your pathetic resistance. Your species is inferior. Your technology is primitive. Your existence serves no purpose in this galaxy. We offer you this final opportunity. Surrender your vessels and submit to immediate processing within 1 rotation period. Refuse and we shall cleanse this system of your pestilence forever. This is not a negotiation. This is your extinction notice. The transmission ended with a sharp click, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Hyun felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. Processing. Everyone knew what that meant. The Velthari didn't take prisoners for very long. Dr. Kim Sola appeared at his shoulder, moving quietly across the observation deck. She was the station's chief scientist, a brilliant woman who had been working day and night to find some kind of solution to their impossible situation. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her lab coat was stained with coffee and exhaustion. Admiral, she said softly, I just came from Section C. The children are asking questions again. Section C was where they had set up the emergency shelters for the youngest survivors. Kids from destroyed colonies, orphans who had watched their parents die in Velthari attacks, babies who would never know what Earth looked like. They lived in converted storage rooms with thin walls and recycled air. What kind of questions? Hyun asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. When they can go home. When the war will be over. When their parents are coming back. Sola's voice was barely above a whisper. I told them that the adults are working very hard to keep everyone safe. But Admiral, they're smart kids. They can see what's happening. They can hear the fear in our voices. Hyun turned away from the window and looked at Sola directly. Her eyes were red with exhaustion and something else. Grief maybe. Or the kind of sadness that came from knowing too much about how the universe really worked. What did you tell them about going home? He asked. Sola was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the red star continued its slow death spiral, casting strange shadows across the metal corridors where humanity's children played games and asked impossible questions. I told them that sometimes home isn't a place, she finally said. Sometimes home is just being with the people who care about you. Hyun nodded slowly. It was a good answer. It was also probably a lie, but it was the kind of lie that parents told children when the truth was too heavy to carry. The communication system buzzed again. Miho's voice returned, professional but strained. Admiral, we're detecting movement in the enemy fleet. It looks like they're beginning to form attack formations. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide soon. Hyun closed his eyes and tried to think. 7 broken ships against 250,000 people against an empire that controlled half the galaxy. Children asking when they could go home to places that no longer existed. There was no home left to return to. Dr. Yoon Jae-won had been working in the station's archive rooms for 18 hours straight. Her eyes burned from staring at ancient alien text that seemed to shift and change every time she looked away. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago, but she kept drinking it anyway because her hands needed something to do while her mind tried to make sense of what she was reading. The archive room was one of the quietest places on New Geneva Station. Deep in the lower levels, surrounded by thick metal walls, it was where they kept all the strange artifacts and data files that human explorers had collected over the decades. Most of it was junk, really. Broken pieces of alien technology that nobody understood. Star charts for dead solar systems. Poetry written in languages that had been extinct for millions of years. But today Jae-won had found something different. Something that made her stomach twist with a mixture of excitement and fear. The text was carved into a piece of black stone that had been discovered on a dead planet at the edge of human space. The writing was incredibly old, created by a species that scientists called the precursors. Nobody knew what had happened to them. They had built cities on 100 worlds, then vanished completely, leaving behind only ruins and questions. Jae-won had been trying to translate precursor writing for most of her career. The language was incredibly complex, with symbols that could mean completely different things depending on how they were arranged. But slowly, word by word, she had been building a dictionary of their ancient speech. And now, staring at her computer screen, she realized that the precursors had been writing about humans. The text spoke of sky warriors from the edge, and those who sleep beyond stars. It described a great war between the reptilian species and these mysterious sky warriors. The stone tablet was actually some kind of warning message, left behind for anyone who might find it in the future. But the most disturbing part was what the text said about timing. According to her translation, this war had happened 800 years ago. 800 years before humans had even built their first spaceships. 800 years before anyone on Earth knew that aliens existed. Jae-won read the passage again, checking her translation carefully. The precursors described the Sky Warriors as the young children of the blue world, and those who carry the fire of their ancestors. They talked about ships that could cross impossible distances and weapons that could break apart enemy fleets like toys. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her communication device. "Admiral Park," she called urgently. "You need to come to the archives immediately. I found something that changes everything." While Jae-won waited for the Admiral to arrive, she kept reading. The precursor text described the reptilian enemies in detail, and every description matched the Velthari perfectly. The same cold intelligence. The same belief that other species were inferior. The same systematic approach to destroying entire civilizations. But according to the ancient writing, the Sky Warriors had defeated them completely. The reptilian empire had been broken apart and scattered across the galaxy. The precursors seemed to believe that the Sky Warriors had gone back to wherever they came from after the war ended. Admiral Park arrived 20 minutes later, followed by Captain Lee and Dr. Kim. They gathered around Jae-won's workstation while she explained what she had discovered. The archive room felt even smaller with 4 people in it, and the ancient alien text seemed to glow strangely in the artificial light. "You're telling me that humans fought a war against the Velthari 800 years ago?" Admiral Park asked. "That's impossible. We barely had sailing ships 800 years ago." "That's what I thought too," Jae-won replied. "But look at these descriptions. The blue world has to be Earth. And these Sky Warriors, they're definitely human." The precursors even described their appearance. 2 arms, 2 legs, hair that grows on their heads, eyes that show emotion. Captain Lee was studying the translation on the screen. "But if humans won this war before, why don't we have any record of it? Where did these Sky Warriors go?" Before anyone could answer, Lieutenant Choi Dae-ho burst into the archive room. His face was flushed with excitement and confusion. He had just returned from a long-range scouting mission to the edge of their solar system. "Admiral," he said breathlessly, "you need to hear this. We found something at the galactic rim. A debris field that stretches for thousands of kilometers." "Debris from what?" Admiral Park asked. "Ships, sir. Massive ships. But the strange thing is, the technology looks human. The design, the materials, even the writing on some of the hull pieces. It's all human. But it's centuries ahead of anything we've ever built." Choi pulled out a data pad and showed them pictures from his scouting mission. The debris field looked like the remains of an enormous space battle. Twisted metal that had once been ship hulls. Broken pieces of weapons systems. fragment of what might have been living quarters or command centers. The quantum signatures are what really confused us, Choi continued. We ran every test we could think of. The metal, the energy residue, even the atomic structure. It all matches Earth perfectly. This is definitely human technology. But Admiral, the dating shows that this battle happened over 700 years ago. The archive room fell completely silent. Dr. Jaiwan looked at her ancient alien text. Lieutenant Choi stared at his data pad full of impossible pictures. Admiral Park tried to process what he was hearing. Could humanity have reached the stars centuries before anyone remembered? Could there have been an entire human civilization that had fought and won a war against the Velthari? And if so, where had they gone after their victory? The questions hung in the air like ghosts, waiting for answers that might change everything they thought they knew about human history. Dr. Yoon Jaiwan had not slept in 36 hours. Empty coffee cups surrounded her workstation like small monuments to her desperation. The ancient precursor text glowed on her screen, and finally, after days of struggle, the last symbols were beginning to make sense. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, entering translation after translation. Each word she decoded made her heart beat faster. The story the precursors had left behind was incredible and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. 800 years ago, humans had indeed reached the stars. But they had not been the same humans who lived on Earth today. They had been advanced beyond anything the current human civilization could imagine. They had built ships that could travel between galaxies. They had mastered technologies that could reshape matter itself. But something had gone wrong on Earth. The precursor text called it the Great Dying, but did not explain what had caused it. Disease, war, natural disaster, the ancient aliens had not known the details. They only knew that the advanced human civilization had been forced to make a terrible choice. They could stay and die with their home world, or they could flee to the empty spaces between galaxies and build a new life in exile. They had chosen exile. The precursors described how the human fleet had gathered every ship, every person, every piece of technology they could carry. Millions of people had boarded generation ships and disappeared beyond the galactic rim, heading into the dark void where no other species had ever traveled. But before they left, they had made preparations. They had built quantum beacons throughout the galaxy, hidden transmitters that could send messages across impossible distances. And they had left instructions with the precursors, asking them to pass along a message to any humans who might come after them. Jaiwan's hands trembled as she read the final passage. The advanced humans had called themselves the Eternal Fleet. And they had promised that if their younger brothers, the humans who remained on Earth, ever faced complete extinction, the Eternal Fleet would return. All they needed was a signal. The door to the archive room burst open. Admiral Park rushed in, followed by Captain Lee and the new officer, Captain Song Mina. The Velthari deadline was approaching fast, and everyone's faces showed the strain of knowing they might all be dead in a few hours. Admiral, Jaiwan said urgently, I've translated the rest of the precursor message. 800 years ago, an advanced human civilization existed beyond our galaxy. They left Earth during some kind of catastrophe and built an empire in exile. But they left instructions. If their younger brothers, us, ever faced extinction, they could be called home. Captain Song Mina shook her head skeptically. Dr. Yoon, even if that's true, how would we contact people who are living outside our entire galaxy? The distances are impossible. It would take millions of years for any message to reach them. Not with normal technology, Jaiwan replied, pointing to her screen. But the precursors left beacons. Quantum transmitters that work by connecting to something called the zero-point field. They can send messages instantly across any distance, even between galaxies. Admiral Park leaned over her shoulder, studying the translation. Where are these beacons? How do we activate them? That's the problem, Jaiwan said. The beacons are scattered throughout the galaxy, hidden on dead worlds and inside asteroid fields. But there's one here in this system. The precursors built it inside the dying star itself. Captain Lee looked confused. Inside the star? How do we access something that's buried in nuclear fire? We don't have to go to it, Jaiwan explained. The beacon is designed to respond to a specific quantum frequency. If we can generate that frequency and broadcast it toward the star, the beacon will activate automatically. But Admiral, it would require every bit of power we have. All of our ship reactors, all of the station's generators, everything. We'd be completely defenseless afterward. The room fell silent. Outside, they could hear the faint rumble of the life support systems working to keep 50,000 people alive. Somewhere in the distance, a child was crying. The Velthari fleet waited in the darkness like hungry wolves, counting down the minutes until they could begin their final attack. Admiral Park closed his eyes and thought about everything they had learned. Ancient human civilizations. Quantum beacons hidden in stars. A fleet of exiled humans living somewhere in the void between galaxies. It sounded like something from a science fiction story. But the evidence was all there, written in alien stone and confirmed by debris fields full of impossible technology. If we use all our power for this transmission, he said slowly, and nothing happens, we'll be sitting ducks when the Velthari attack. No shields, no weapons, no way to run. Yes, sir, Jaiwan replied. It's a complete gamble. Captain Song Mina was studying the technical specifications on Jaiwan's screen. How long would it take to set up this transmission? About 2 hours to rewire all our power systems. The actual transmission would only take a few minutes. Admiral Park looked around the room at his officers. These people had followed him through 3 years of the worst war humanity had ever fought. They had watched their friends die and their homes burn. They had kept fighting even when fighting seemed pointless. Now he was asking them to bet everything on a message to people who might not even exist anymore. Do it, he said finally. Rewire the power systems. Send the signal. 2 hours later, New Geneva Station went dark. Every light, every computer, every life support system shut down as all available power flowed into the ancient transmission array. In the dying star at the center of their system, a precursor beacon that had slept for 8 centuries suddenly blazed to life, sending a message across the void. The message was simple: come home. Your younger brothers need you. The first sign that something impossible was happening came from the navigation sensors. Lieutenant Park Ji-hoon was monitoring the long-range scanners when every screen on his console suddenly went white with interference. He blinked hard, thinking his tired eyes were playing tricks on him, but the readings stayed the same. Admiral, he called out, his voice cracking slightly. I'm getting some very strange readings from the edge of the system. The sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions, but there's nothing there that should cause them. Admiral Park Hyun hurried to the navigation station. Around him, the bridge of New Geneva Station was still mostly dark. They had managed to restore basic life support after sending their desperate message to the dying star, but most of their power systems were still offline. The air smelled of burned circuits and fear. What kind of distortions? Hyun asked, leaning over Ji-hoon's shoulder to look at the scanner displays. It's like space itself is bending, sir. The readings look similar to what happens when a ship enters hyperspace, but the scale is enormous. Whatever this is, it's much bigger than any ship we've ever seen. Captain Lee Miho joined them at the scanner station. His face was grim with exhaustion and the knowledge that the Velthari attack could begin at any moment. Could it be some kind of Velthari superweapon? Maybe they're bringing in reinforcements for their final assault. Before anyone could answer, the space at the edge of their solar system began to change. The stars seemed to shimmer and blur, like looking at the bottom of a swimming pool. Then reality split open like someone had torn a hole in the universe itself. The first ship that emerged was unlike anything any human had ever seen. It was massive, easily 10 times larger than the biggest Federation battleship. But more than its size, it was the design that took their breath away. The ship was clearly human in its basic structure, but it had been evolved and refined beyond recognition. Smooth curves replaced angular edges. The hull seemed to bend light around itself, creating strange optical illusions that hurt to look at directly. And it was not alone. Ship after ship poured through the Terran space. Elegant dreadnoughts that moved like living things. Sleek destroyers that seemed to dance through space without any visible engines. Massive carrier vessels that looked like floating cities. Each ship hummed with energy that made the air itself vibrate with power. On the other side of the system, War Commander Thekval was watching his own sensors with growing confusion and alarm. His reptilian face twisted with rage as his tactical computers tried to process what they were seeing. What is this? He snarled at his subordinates. Where did these vessels come from? Why were they not detected by our long-range scouts? His science officer, a smaller Velthari with nervous yellow eyes, stammered as he read from his instruments. Commander, the energy readings from these new ships are impossible. Our sensors cannot even properly measure their power output. It exceeds anything in our databases. Back on New Geneva Station, the communication system suddenly came to life. A human face appeared on the main screen, but it was a human face that had been subtly changed by centuries of genetic modification. The man's eyes were slightly larger than normal, adapted for seeing in different kinds of light. His skin had a faint luminescent quality, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that suggested his vocal cords had been enhanced. New Geneva Station, the man said, his voice warm with an emotion that might have been joy or relief or something else entirely. "This is Admiral Kang Tae-1 of the Eternal Fleet. We received your call across the dark void. We have come home." Admiral Park Hyun stared at the screen in amazement. Behind Admiral Kang, he could see the bridge of what was obviously an advanced human starship. The technology was clearly centuries ahead of anything the Federation had ever built, but the basic design principles were unmistakably human. Admiral Kang Hyun managed to say, "We sent out a signal based on ancient precursor instructions. We weren't sure if anyone would receive it, or if anyone even existed to receive it." Kang smiled, and his smile carried the warmth of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "We have been waiting and watching for 800 years. When the Great Plague forced our ancestors to flee Earth, they promised that we would return if our younger brothers ever needed us. Today that promise is fulfilled." Through the viewing windows of New Geneva Station, more ships continued to emerge from the tear in space. The fleet seemed endless. Thousands of vessels of every size and type, each one more advanced than anything the Federation had ever imagined. Some of the ships were so large that they had their own weather systems, clouds forming and dissipating around their hulls. WarCommander Thekval's voice cut across all communication frequencies, filled with rage and disbelief. "Impossible mammals. Our intelligence reports indicated that your species possessed only primitive technology. Where did you find such vessels? What trickery is this?" Admiral Kang's expression changed. The warmth disappeared from his face, replaced by something cold and dangerous. When he replied, his voice carried the authority of someone who commanded technologies that could reshape reality itself. "We did not find these ships, reptile. We built them. We are what humanity becomes when given time to grow, time to learn, and time to remember what was done to our home world." The Velthari fleet, which moments before had been preparing for an easy victory over the last remnants of humanity, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that defied every assumption they had made about human capabilities. The children of Earth had returned, and they had not come alone. WarCommander Thekval had been in hundreds of battles during his long military career. He had destroyed entire star systems and watched civilizations burn under the might of the Velthari Empire. He had never known fear in combat because he had always possessed overwhelming superiority in numbers, weapons, and technology. That certainty died in the first 30 seconds of engagement. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen before. They didn't follow normal physics. One moment a massive dreadnought would be floating motionless in space, and the next instant it would appear on the opposite side of his fleet without any visible transition. His weapons officers fired everything they had, but their energy beams simply bent around the human ships like water flowing around rocks. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," Thekval ordered, his voice already showing the first hints of panic. "Bring the planet crackers online. Use maximum power." The Velthari fleet unleashed weapons that had turned moons into dust. Beams of energy that could slice through the core of a world struck the human flagship directly. The massive energy should have vaporized any known material instantly. Instead, the human ship absorbed the attack completely. Its hull didn't even show scorch marks. Admiral Kang's voice came across all communication channels, calm and patient like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "Your weapons are based on crude manipulation of electromagnetic forces. We moved beyond such primitive technology 600 years ago." On the bridge of New Geneva Station, Admiral Park Hyun watched the battle through the observation windows with a mixture of awe and terror. The human ships weren't just fighting the Velthari fleet. They were demonstrating technologies that seemed like magic. One of the human destroyers approached a group of Velthari cruisers. Instead of firing weapons, it simply pointed what looked like a small antenna at the enemy ships. The cruisers began to come apart, their hulls dissolving at the atomic level as if they were made of sand. "My God," whispered Dr. Kim Sola. "They're not destroying those ships. They're taking them apart molecule by molecule." Captain Lee Miho was studying the tactical displays with the trained eye of a military officer. "Look at their formation patterns. They're not just more advanced than us. They're fighting like they can see the future. Every move they make counters Velthari tactics before the Velthari even execute them." The battle, if it could even be called a battle, continued for exactly 17 minutes. The human ships moved through the Velthari fleet like sharks through a school of fish. Some enemy vessels were disintegrated by weapons that seemed to erase them from existence. Others found their own computer systems turned against them, their AI cores reprogrammed in microseconds to attack their former allies. The most terrifying moment came when one of the human ships demonstrated what Admiral Kang called a gravity lens. The weapon bent spacetime itself, creating a small artificial black hole that swallowed an entire squadron of Velthari destroyers. The black hole lasted for exactly 10 seconds before disappearing, leaving behind only empty space where 12 enemy ships had been moments before. War Commander Thekval watched his mighty fleet reduced to scrap metal and running scared. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were fleeing like frightened children. His own flagship shook as systems failed all around him. "Retreat!" he screamed into his communication system. "All ships retreat immediately. Send word to the Empire. Tell them we have encountered a force beyond our understanding." But Admiral Kong was not finished with his demonstration. As the surviving Velthari ships tried to escape, his voice filled every communication channel across their empire. Not just in this star system but on every Velthari world, every space station, every military outpost. Somehow, the humans had hacked into their entire communication network simultaneously. "People of the Velthari Empire," Admiral Kong said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute power. "You have made one fundamental error in your war against humanity. You believed we were alone. You thought you were fighting a small, primitive species with limited resources. On 1,000 Velthari worlds, reptilian leaders gathered around communication screens, listening to words that would change their understanding of the galaxy forever. Beyond this galaxy lies the Terran Dominion. 10,000 worlds populated by humans who have had 8 centuries to grow, to learn, to build. We possess technologies you cannot comprehend. We command fleets that number in the millions. And most importantly, we do not abandon our family." Admiral Kong paused, letting his words sink in across the vast Velthari Empire. "We are not the weak prey you thought to hunt. We are humanity. And we remember every world you destroyed, every life you took, every child you left orphaned. This was not a battle. This was a message. End your war against our younger brothers or we will end you." The transmission cut off, leaving behind a silence that stretched across star systems. On New Geneva Station, Captain Park Minji stood at the observation deck where Admiral Park Hyun had stood just days before, watching the dying red star. But now, instead of despair, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Tears streamed down her face as she looked out at the incredible fleet that had appeared from beyond the galaxy to save them. "Welcome home," she whispered to the stars. Admiral Kang's response came gently through the communication system, carrying the warmth of 8 centuries of patience and love. "We never left, sister. We were just getting stronger. The galaxy would never underestimate the children of Earth again." And humanity, both young and old, had found each other across the vast darkness of space. The war was over. The family was whole.